Okay, good morning, everyone. I have to stop my dance party now that we're getting started, and I'm turning my camera on. So, hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another session in our Fast, Fun, and fantastic series with Innovate HR. So, I will go ahead and get this started. I think that we've got most of our participants. Now, this is being recorded. You're welcome to put questions and things in the chat. I've got it up over here, so if you see me looking over here, that's what I'm looking at. I believe that I can unmute you too, so if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand. I'm pretty sure I can figure that out at this point, but no promises. Yes, thank you so much for attending. This topic today is the art of feedback, driving results through conversations. And for those of you who have watched some of these before, you know I like to keep these short and sweet, to the point, and I try to keep them upbeat and fun. And this topic is one that I get a lot of questions about because this is vital, especially in leadership roles, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. So I'm hoping that you can leave with some good tips and tokens to take with you in your day-to-day. So let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who do not know me, I am Shauna Chambers. I am the Vice President here with Innovate HR. And today's topic, we're going to shift feedback from something that we typically dread to something that drives results. And I'm hoping that you walk away with timing and techniques that's going to turn everyday interactions into growth opportunities. But before we get started, I do want to put up the rest of our fabulous team here with Innovate HR. We do partner with small to mid-sized organizations to provide the full back office HR support, just like you would see if you've ever worked at a Fortune 500 company. However, I think that we have a lot more personality and we've got a lot more flexibility. So not only do you have me working for you and have the coordinators, but you have an entire team of HR people that have your back and your employees' back. And we do everything from compliance, policy development, employee relations, strategic HR planning, of course, pesky payroll, and also training sessions just like this. So we are headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, but we're actually spread out all over the place: North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and we actually cover clients across all 38 states, or 38 of our states. So we're pretty out there for us to be such a small team. But enough about us. Let's go ahead and dive in. Here's our agenda for the day. Again, short and sweet. We're going to talk about why feedback matters now more than ever, how to give feedback that actually sticks, motivating, coaching, and correcting. We're going to talk about the differences of those. And we're going to wrap up with a little bit of feedback in action. I'd like to hear from you if possible. So this is where I'm going to open up the chat and ask you some questions. So let's go ahead and get started. So feedback, what is it? It's simply a process of giving constructive suggestions aimed at improving performance, reinforcing good behavior, and improving an employee's morale. And I'm going to go through what feedback is and what it's not from a perspective of an HR professional. So feedback should be a tool for growth that helps people improve performance and their confidence. It should be a two-way conversation. It's not just about telling your employees expectations, but also listening. It should be a two-way conversation. It should be timely. Should never wait to give feedback. It's best to give it when it's close to whatever event or behavior you're speaking about. Keep in mind to keep it short and concise when necessary, but also just to make sure it's given in a very timely manner. Specific and actionable. Should focus on clear behaviors, not vague impressions. And a signal of investment. It shows that that you care enough to help someone succeed. I've always said giving an employee feedback, whether it's constructive criticism, whether it's motivational feedback, giving them goals, that's the kind of thing that you can do an employee, is to give them and help them see what your expectations are. and make it a regular habit. Don't just wait for formal reviews. Don't just wait for the employee to come to you. Make it a habit, even if it's a 5-minute conversation at the water cooler. Definitely make it something that happens on a repeated basis. Now, what feedback is not? It should never be a personal attack. It should target someone's behavior, not necessarily their character. It should not be a one-time event, like I said before, waiting until review season, like it's just going to lose its impact by the time, if it's a year later or even 6 months later. Definitely give feedback in the moment. It should never be a guessing game. So unclear feedback creates confusion. It can also create resentment. It should never be criticism in disguise. So true feedback is going to build an employee, not necessarily tear them down. And it should never be a venting session. That is emotional dumping. I think we've probably all been there. We've all been a victim of that, I'm pretty sure. It should never be an emotional dumping on behalf of the supervisor to the employee. You're just going to cut down on the communication. Employee's going to shut down. And it should not only be for poor performance. Even high performers need direction and recognition. So repetitive check-in. So again, mid-year, I know we talk about performance reviews, annual reviews a lot in human resources, but that should never be the one time an employee is hearing feedback from a supervisor. If an employee is hearing feedback at their mid-year review and it's the first time they're hearing it, that means you're not doing a good enough job throughout the year of communicating feedback to the employee. So hopefully after this session, you'll feel more comfortable doing that. But again, this is not just a checkbox to be checked. It should be a part of your everyday habit, and it's a momentum building moment. So keep that in mind. We don't give feedback because it's comfortable necessarily. We do it because it creates clarity and it creates confidence in our employees. And there's some myths that go with feedback that I want to talk about really quickly. It should not be considered criticism. Feedback is considered information with a purpose. Like I said before, feedback is the kindest thing that you can do to your employees. And feedback, think of it as fuel. It's going to tell people what to keep doing, what to stop doing, or what to shift doing. So you can't expect your employees to read your mind. You cannot expect them to just know what to do. You definitely need to give them the opportunity to understand what your expectations are. The only way to do that is to give them the feedback. And I have a little statistic here. Companies with strong feedback, they create employees that are actually 3 times more engaged. And I know now, I don't know about all of you all, but right now, in my opinion, I think employee retention is vital. So you definitely want to hang on to your good employees. And one of the best ways to do that is to ensure that you're giving them proper feedback. And not only is it for developmental purposes and to help employee engagement, but there are some legal perspectives that I just want to touch base on very, very briefly. I have separate trainings that dive deeper into this legal stuff, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I do think it's important to understand that it does create equitable opportunity. So from a legal perspective, ensure everyone is getting those same opportunities for growth through that consistent feedback. So what do I mean by that? You definitely want to make sure that you're giving all of your employees the same opportunities by telling them what your expectations are. So what you wouldn't want to do is give a certain employee your expectations clear, giving them the opportunity to grow and shine, and not giving that same opportunity to another employee that could be seen in the eyes of the law as discrimination, or just not giving people the same opportunities. And of course, I think I made it a whole 5 minutes and I didn't mention documentation, but I'm an HR person. Documentation. So don't forget to document. So how it's done really and truly is less important. Organizations have their own mechanisms. Sometimes it's laid out in employee handbook, but from my perspective, the how it's done is less important. It's more important that it's done and that it's documented, whether that be in a notebook or you have a little note task thing on your computer. or however that's done. Just make sure that you get it documented, dates, locations, what was said, how it was received, and keep to the facts. And documentation is another subject I could probably spend all day on because I love it. But it's definitely important to not just document feedback, but to make sure that you get it documented how that employee received the feedback. You might need to address this later or go back to that. And if you ever get to the point where you do have to do something more formal, like a write-up, or you call me up and say, I want to let so-and-so go, I'm going to be asking you for documentation. So this stuff is very, very important. But what you do not want to do, the worst thing you can do is just ignore behavior, ignore the employee, hope that it goes away. That's the easy thing to do. It's not the right thing to do. So you never want to ignore bad behavior. You definitely want to address it. And you want to give that employee the opportunity to improve by giving them the feedback. And you also, in the same time, you don't want to only just focus on good behaviors. I think that happens probably more so than the other, is focusing and trying to encourage those good behaviors only, but not addressing the behaviors that you'd like to see improvement on. And I think that's kind of human nature, is you want to encourage the good stuff, but you also have to make sure that you mention the stuff that you want to see improvement on as well. So if you want to, like, if we're going to start talking about getting rid of, if you have a weak employee, a poor performer, but then there's no feedback that exists to support that, then I'm going to come back to you and give you some suggestions of some further steps we should do before we move for any kind of adverse action. Again, that's just to protect the employer, it's to protect you. Very simple. I like to keep things very easy. Generally, feedback, you can boil it down to these three things. I like the 3 C's. It's easy to remember. It should be clear, specific about what it is that you saw or what it is that you heard, should be constructive, focus on, again, behaviors, not necessarily personalities, and it should be consistent. Make that feedback part of your routine, not just always a reaction to some crisis. I know those happen daily, sometimes hourly, but definitely make it a constant practice that you perform on the day-to-day basis. And feedback is really most powerful when it's in real time, not, again, just regular, not just during the annual performance reviews that you might do. And when it comes to feedback, I'm now going to dive in and give you some more specific examples. And I've separated this into 3 different types of feedback. So these, again, should be used across the board with all employees. So your high performers, your mediocre performers, and your poor performers should get all 3 of these. So what I'm going to dive in now is what they are, when they should be used, and we're going to go through some tactics and some examples. So we've got motivating, we've got coaching, and we've got correcting. So let's go ahead and get started with the motivating. I think this is probably our favorite kind to give. I love to motivate people. We're going to use this when an employee is doing really well, when we want to reinforce positive behaviors, and if we want to stretch their potential. If we see someone that we definitely think can rise to the next level, whatever that looks like, it is a great idea to go ahead and motivate, use motivation for that employee. The goal is to reinforce and to inspire that employee. And here's an example of how that would look is if you're having a conversation. You could say, hey, you handled that client call with great confidence. Let's keep building on that momentum. Very positive. So here are a couple of motivating tips. What you want to do is catch people doing it right. So don't just wait for the really big, big wins. Praise the small daily wins. That helps to kind of build the momentum. You could say something like, I noticed that you helped jump on that client call. Great initiative. Next, say thank you. That's pretty easy. Be often, say it specifically. Saying a good job just sometimes isn't good enough. It's really good to be more specific. Like, thank you for staying late to finish that report. That really made a big difference. Next up, shout out publicly. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the individual, but it's a great way to recognize win in team meetings or in emails. It helps to build culture and morale. I know that some organizations have a very heavy social media presence. We like to do that at Innovate HR. We'll brag on our employees on our social media. So I think sometimes shouting it out publicly can be a great motivator for some employees. Ask for input. Involve employees in decisions where possible. It just shows that you trust them and that you respect their opinions. And offer some growth opportunities. So this doesn't necessarily mean giving a raise, or it doesn't have to be about compensation or money. It can, again, be about growth within your organization. And then celebrate the progress, not just the results. So acknowledge effort and improvement. Even if the goal isn't fully met, it's important to acknowledge the effort that individual put into whatever task that was. And last but not least, know what motivates each person. So there's 1,000 different personalities out there. Half of them are going to love to be recognized in a real public manner. Others, they would just rather crawl under a rock. So I think it's important to know your employees before you dive into some of these. And I've got lots of more examples. So if you ever need, if you are just blowing a blank idea, your brain's not working, like apparently mine is right now, give me a call, shoot me an email, and I've got a ton of ideas that I can share with you on how to motivate your people. Now we're going to talk about coaching. So coaching is a little different than motivating. So this is when there's potential, but the skill needs some development. The behavior might not necessarily be right out wrong and need corrective action, but there's a better way to do something that could be more effective. And you want to spark growth through guidance. So the goal here is to grow skills and self-awareness. And here is an example. Let's talk about how you might approach that differently next time to get better results. Now we're going to talk through a couple of coaching tips. So sometimes I like to, managers, the difference between a manager and a coach, think about it like this. Managers typically tell people what to do. Coaches are going to ask. Managers are going to critique. Coaches want to grow people. So when you're coaching someone, you kind of want to have this mentality going in through it. Mid-year reviews should be more of a conversation, not just that evaluation. And tips for a powerful coaching tone: be curious, but not necessarily accusatory. So asking things like, how do you think that interaction went, before jumping in and giving them their feedback. A lot of times what I find is when an employee knows that they could have done a little bit of a better job, or they're not feeling like they reach full maximum potential, they're probably going to realize it before you even have a chance to point it out to them. So I think it's kind of a good tactic to maybe even ask them, hey, how do you think that sales call went? Get that feedback first, and then that kind of opens up the conversation for improvement without it being too awkward. And then even passing someone in a 5-minute hallway conversation, you don't necessarily have to make these super, super formal. Well, I want you to document them. They don't have to necessarily be super formal. It could be a very informal conversation. Now, correcting. This is probably the one that is the most uncomfortable for most individuals, because it is when an expectation is not being met. And this is when there's a pattern, you need something to change. You may have already gone through the motivating, you may have already gone through the coaching, and for whatever's happening, that employee is just not getting it. So then you got to go into the correcting conversation. So an immediate course of correction is needed in this situation. The goal, it's pretty simple, is to address performance and conduct issues with clarity. So this is the kindest thing that you could possibly do for an employee, is tell them when they're not meeting your expectations. Lay it out for them. Let them know, hey, I need you to be here. You're not here, so I'm going to help you get there. We're going to talk about this. And here is an example. We can't miss deadlines like this again. So I know that happens. Let's walk through what went wrong and how we're going to fix it. Now I'm going to give you, because I think that this is probably one of the feedback strategies that is most complicated for people to do. And so I've broken this down into kind of a simple formula to help you bleed this down. You don't need to make it terribly complicated. It doesn't need to be exhausted. It doesn't even need to be super, super formal. But I do think having the strategy will help you approach this somewhat uncomfortable conversation. So we've got situation, behavior, and impact. You want to identify what is the situation, what's the behavior, and what is the overall impact of that behavior. So I've got here a couple of examples. So your last reports, that's considered the situation, had several errors, that's a behavior, and were submitted late, another behavior. That put us behind, that's the impact. Very simple, very direct, very to the point. Another example is in yesterday's meeting, that's the situation. You interrupted twice, that's the behavior, and it disrupted the flow, that's the impact. Now, something to keep in mind, I've got over here, end with forward-looking suggestion. So to take this a step further and make this more impactful, I've got an example of how to end each one of these with a forward-looking suggestion. So for this first one about the reports, going forward, double check your work and reach out if you need any assistance meeting the deadlines. So again, that's forward-looking. We're giving them an expectation. We're looking forward to how this is going to improve in the future. The second example is, now that you are aware, be mindful of interrupting others. Your insight is always welcome, so let's make sure it's delivered in a way that will be appreciated. Very positive, very forward thinking, hopefully leaving on a positive note. Now, while it's always a good idea to end with a positive forward-looking suggestion, what you want to be really careful of is not coming into what I call a confusing corrective sandwich. So let's talk about what this sandwich is. And looking at this is actually making me very hungry. So what do I mean by a confusing correction sandwich? So what this does is it's essentially giving positive feedback, because that's what we're comfortable doing. We're really good at motivating, but then putting the corrective action kind of in the middle and then ending with another really motivating positive feedback. So what that does is it confuses people and it can really dilute your message. So what I've got here is an example of what that could look like. So you're such a valuable part of the team and you always bring great energy. That said, your last few reports had several errors. They were submitted late, which put us behind. But overall, I think you're doing great, and we all enjoy working with you. So the real message here, which I have in bold in the middle, that the reports were late and they were inaccurate, that got buried between the two loaves of bread, which were super motivating and positive statements. So while it's very, very important to end on a positive forward-thinking note, what you don't want to do is have it diluted to where all that employee heard was, oh, I mean, that was good. I did a great job. That's all they're hearing is the positive. Or something that could turn and make it even worse is that you're setting this individual up for criticism by sandwiching in that the corrective action in the middle. So this is a very easy item to remember, but it's so often it happens so much. That's why I put this in this presentation, is because it's human nature. It's what we want to do. We want to focus on the good, but sometimes, especially when it gets to corrective action, you just need to be a little bit more direct. Keep it simple. Keep to that formula that I gave you on the slide before. And honestly, I think your employees will really appreciate that, because then they're not going to be confused about what message it is that you're trying to get to them. So now I've got some feedback in action. So this is where I would like to hear from you. I think I have our chat enabled. So what I've got here, I think I've got 3 different scenarios here. And what I want to hear from you is if you feel that this scenario warrants a motivating conversation, a coaching conversation, or a correcting conversation. So right here in this scenario 1, we have the chronic over talker. We don't have any of those out there, right? So our situation is an employee frequently dominates team meetings, cutting others off and sharing long-winded updates. Their input is valuable, but it's affecting the team morale. So I'm going to give you all just a second, find the chat in our Teams meeting here. And I want to hear from you. Should we respond with a motivating feedback? Should we jump into coaching? Or should we just go ahead and correct this individual? So I want to give you just a second to see if anybody would like to take this one. Or if you would like to speak, raise your hand, and I'm pretty sure I can unmute you from here. So let's see what I've got going here. Amanda, corrected. All right, we've got a coaching. All right, Noelle, coaching. Anybody else want to jump in there? We've got 2 coachings and a corrective. All right. All right, we've got somebody else typing. Coaching. So I am very happy that nobody jumped into motivating, because the best answer is going to be coaching. So good job, you all, for choosing the coaching. Why am I jumping to coaching? I believe this behavior needs to be addressed thoughtfully, but maybe not necessarily punished yet. So coaching is going to help that employee become more self-aware, understand how that behavior is impacting others. Now, if you have this coaching session with this individual and you're not seeing an improvement over time, definitely jump into the corrective. That's when we're going to have to take it up a step further. But for this, I think that noticing it for the first time and having this initial conversation, coaching is going to get you pretty far. So I have an example of a statement that I'm going to share with you. Your insights are always thorough. They're always appreciated. I've noticed that in meetings, however, sometimes others struggle to get a word in. So let's go ahead and work on creating a space for more team members to have their input. Easy peasy, to the point. That individual should hear the message. Again, if they continue to have this behavior, let's jump into a corrective conversation. So good job, guys. All right, scenario 2, we have the silent superstar. An employee consistently meets deadlines, delivers high quality work, and never complains. They're like the best employee ever. But they fly under the radar and they actually seem a little disengaged. So I'm going to hear from you. Should we motivate this person? Should we give them some coaching? Or should we jump into corrective action with this individual? So I need some Jeopardy music. Wouldn't that be kind of fun? I want to hear from you all. What do you think this person, what would be the best conversation? Motivating. Thanks, Molly. All right, Tariq, motivating from you too. All right. What else we got here? Who else wants to jump in here? Shelby, motivation, motivating. Rachel. All right, you all are right on. I agree with you 100%. I think motivating is going to be your best course of action for this superstar employee. So it's an opportunity to recognize the good performance, re-energize that employee with purposeful encouragement or development opportunities. And I have an example of what that could look like. You've been quietly crushing it, but I want you to know I see it. I'd love to explore how we can stretch your skills even further if you're open to it. So I think giving that individual the motivating, another good tactic could be asking them for their opinion on something. That shows that you trust them and that you trust their opinions. So there's 100 different motivating things that we could throw at this individual to try and get them more engaged. But what you don't want is to have a good employee who's doing everything you need to get disengaged and just not get any feedback from you at all. That's when you could lose that employee. All right, scenario 3, we have the sloppy submitter. So we have an employee turns in project. They do it on time. It's great. They're not late on it. So that's helpful. But it often, you have noticed, and you've mentioned several times, it does contain avoidable errors and requires extra cleanup by other individuals. So let's go ahead and talk about, what do you think is going to be the best response for our sloppy submitter? works on time, but it's got unavoidable errors that's creating more work. Should we motivate this person? Should we give this person some coaching? Or should we go ahead and give this person some corrective action? All right, I'm going to open up the chat. I want to hear from you. Oh, I'm loving these answers. Molly, I like where you're going with that. It's a trend. That's a very good observation. Correcting. Okay, let's go ahead. You all are right on. This definitely, Molly's hit it on the head. This is a trend. It's happened before. It's unavoidable errors. Definitely want to go ahead and get that person notice that, hey, you're not giving me the expectation. We need to correct this so that you can do a better job in the future. So why? The issue is impacting the team. The efficiency must be addressed directly and clearly with expectations for improvement. My example of a statement that you could give: I appreciate you meeting deadlines consistently. However, the last few submissions have been repeated errors, slowing down the whole team. I need you to take a more careful approach going forward. Let's talk about how we can support that. Now, what I don't want you to do is turn this into a sandwich. Remember, we talked about the 2 loaves of bread. So what a sandwich could look like is you do an amazing job with meeting deadlines consistently. Great job. Your last few submissions have had some errors that slowed down the team, but I know that I can always count on you to meet deadlines, and I appreciate that. So you see the difference in that approach versus the more direct, I need you, let's talk about how we can support this. The second one, while motivating and great, that message about, hey, you're missing, you're submitting things with errors, completely getting lost in the super motivating sandwich that we talked about earlier. So great job, you all. And yes, Amanda, absolutely. This is actually being recorded. So once this is done, I can send this out to whomever would like to have this recording. And now we're coming to the wrap up. So this leaves us plenty of time if you have any questions or you need any guidance or assistance. But before we close this out, some key takeaways is I want to make sure that if you take one token from this, I feel like I've done a good job, but I'm hoping you take more than that. So why does feedback matter? It builds engagement 3 times more likely. Remember that statistic. It promotes clarity, equity, and growth. It encourages a culture of communication, and it's critical from a legal and a documentation standpoint. Avoid these simple mistakes. Don't ignore the behavior. Don't only focus on the positives. Don't use the compliment sandwich on a confusing way. And our closing message here: feedback is fuel, not fire, but fuel. It should be kind, it should be clear, and it should be consistent. And make feedback a daily habit and a leadership strength. So super simple. I do realize it's more complicated than some of this can seem, but that's why we're here to help you out. I love to talk through scenarios and situations. If you have anything that you would like to ask, please put it in here. I'm happy to answer. We've got a little bit more time. I'll turn on the music and give you an opportunity to please scan with your cell phone this little QR code right here. This takes you to a form that gives you an opportunity to give me feedback, to let me know what you want to see in the future. If there are some topics that you would really like to see us dive into, let me know. It's an easy way to give feedback. It can be anonymous. If you want to give me constructive criticism feedback, please feel free to do so. You can attach your name too, that's fine. But I'm sitting here. Okay, let's look. I do have a question. Yes, I will absolutely send this to you, Shelby. Thank you for joining. Molly, all right, I have a question. I'm here sitting on my team, so it may be best in chat. How do you deal with a situation where you have a team member who tends to be defensive about feedback? For example, they refer to explaining why they did it their way instead of hearing your feedback. The defensive, oh my gosh, that's can be very frustrating from a supervisory leadership perspective. I think the best approach when someone consistently becomes defensive is to politely call them out on it. Say, let them get their statement out and calmly say, and I think this can only be done if you're calm and you're addressing it again in a constructive fashion. Hey, do you realize whenever I give you feedback, your immediate response is always defensive? And just let it sit for a minute. And if it does not continue to improve, a lot of times people just don't realize they're being that way. If you've done that several times and they continue to get defensive, that's when I would recommend taking it a step further and maybe even getting some, I don't know, performance improvement plan, whatever your expectation is. At the end of the day, it's listen, when I give you feedback and I need you to correct something, I don't need you to immediately get defensive. I need you to know I'm doing this to see you improve. I'm doing this out of the kindness of my heart. I want to see you be successful. But when you're defensive, that's a blockade, and we just can't have that going forward. So definitely can be challenging. I've definitely had employees that have done that, but typically when I confront them on that behavior alone, I have typically seen an improvement. The ones that don't improve usually find their way out. So that's a tricky one. But if you ever want to role play and we can talk offline about this, I'm happy to do so. Okay. Thank you, Noelle. I so enjoyed doing these. That is a great question, Molly. Is there anything else? Yes, no problem. You've got my email address. I got it up there, right? Yep, got my email address up there. You've got my telephone number. Please give us a call. Scan the little QR code. Those of you who know me know I like geek out on these QR codes. Once I discovered how to do it, it's like I QR code everything. I think it's the best thing ever. But yes, please let me know. Give me your feedback. Tune in for the next topic. It will be, I think in 3 weeks is our next training session. So I'll get those invites out shortly. And yeah, I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. And I'm here if you need anything. So thanks, everybody.